Everyone. This is going to be our acrylic demonstration for this month. One of them, I'm hoping to do another one while I'm away. And because it's plein air month, I wanted to talk about the times when, for some reason, you don't get time to do that painting in plein air, but you started out with the intention of going painting on location. And so you might have got there and perhaps done a few little colour sketches, and then something happened and you couldn't continue. In this case, it was a storm blowing in. So I got the sketches and I got a photo, and I'm going to use those back in the studio to do the painting. So not always when you're going out painting on location does it work out, and if it doesn't, you can take the images, the reference material that you collected, sketches and photographs, and come back and do it in the studio, and it will give you a bit more of a feeling for the place. You've been out there, you've felt the weather on your face, you've done some sketches, you've seen the colour for real, not just through a photograph, and you've got some colour sketches here. It looks very green in the photo, but actually when I was there, you can't see it in this one, it's a black and white one, and I've somehow lost that photo after I turned it into a black and white, so I can't show you that. But because of my colour sketches, I know that as we got closer in here, behind that hill, it was quite yellow gold, the way the grasses do get here in Tasmania and Australia. So I've got some little colour references there, which I wouldn't have had if I just had the photo. I would have thought it was that gold and green, but it's more yellow gold. Now what I'm going to do is do a small painting for you. I'm going to show you the materials and then we'll get into it, and I'll talk about the composition after I show you the materials. Okay, let's switch over. I've got the three blues because I'll be mixing up some greens. I'm using sky and watercolours. Here I've got a purple, and here I've got Mars black, so a browny dark. And then I have two other things. I have some gloss flow medium. It's a glazing liquid. It makes the paint a little bit more blendable and extendable and a little bit more fluid. And over in this corner I have the Atelier Heavy Gel. It's a gloss one as well. That just gives a little bit of structure to the paint so that I can get some brush marks in there. I've got a little wooden prepared panel. I showed you how to do that earlier. A rag for cleaning off my brushes. Here I've got just three small brushes, which are mostly what I'm going to use. A very small flat, a little round, and a slightly bigger round, because it's just a small panel. And two palette knives, one with a nice sharp edge for making some marks on there, a rounded edge if I want to do some more rounded marks, and this one is just for mixing colours on the palette. And in fact I'm going to swap these over so I don't keep moving my hand over there when I'm doing the painting. So there are that's my setup. I have some spare brushes and spare palette knives if I need them out here. Let's get back the reference material that I had, and we'll just move this out of the way for a moment. Go to the side. So I had that photo and a black and white and my sketches. And so what am I actually going to put onto this small panel? I used just a little cut out piece of matte board to move around on here and see. That's just too much to put on this small panel. I wanted to bring it down. So I was debating whether I would have the more land and the lighthouse in this corner, or whether I would have the lighthouse there, more sea. So you can see that you could do a number of things with this. I could pop it around this way, and I quite like that actually. That's quite nice. I hadn't considered that one, and I didn't make a sketch that way, but now that I'm just playing around on this photo, I can see that I do quite like that format. So I could turn it up and do it that way. I could do it the other way where I've got more land there and the lighthouse there. I actually want to include the sea because that's really fundamentally what a lighthouse is about, isn't it? It's protecting those on the water from landing on the rock. So I do want to include the sea there. So now I'm deciding whether I'm going to do it that way or that way. So what I've done is actually print out another piece of that close-up, and then I'm just going to have another play with that and see, does that help me decide what I want to do. So there's the lighthouse in the corner, I've got the sea, I've got some of the foreground there, and I quite like that composition, so I think that is really how I'm going to paint it. I had planned to do a landscape, but sometimes when you're playing around with it, you change your mind. I do have this other black and white, which I quite like as well, of the area, which I took on the same day. And that has a leading in path, and I really do like that. And I don't have colour in that one, but I do have the colour references in the other. So I might actually do that one. So we've got a little lead in, we've got a glimpse of the water, we've got the lighthouse there. And that is what I'm going to go for. I will keep that photo as a reference photo so that you can see the colour that I'm working with. I'll try and keep all my reference material there so you can see what I'm doing. And here's the piece I've been working on. We'll put that one away. I'll bring the palette in closer. This is where I'll be doing my mixing. It's a stay wet palette, so I have here the sponge underneath it, which is very damp, and then a special paper that lets the water just slowly seep through so that I get keep my working paints nice and moist. Let's put this right up into the main area there. You don't really need to see the water, do you? So that might go. But I would like you to see the mixing area. I need to get the shapes in, and what I'm going to do is just use this brush. Try and see if I can get some extra light in there to fill out the shadows for you. Just need to put a new battery in. Try that. It might help a little with the shadows there. Let's see how that goes. I'm going to be sketching in the main lines. I'm going to start off up here with the sky, which is going to go across like so. It's quite high up, maybe even a little bit higher. So I'm going to sketch in just using a little bit of the cobalt blue, thinned with, I just wipe my brush off on the rag over there in between, thinned with a little bit of the white. I'm going to draw in that just freehand across there where the sky and the sea are going to meet. I'm going to make that quite wide just to give me the idea of the sea and the sky. And there I've got the line in it. So it's going to be a little bit blurred between the sea and the sky. And I'm going to sketch in the other shapes. It's quite a small painting, so I don't really need to put in too much detail. I can add that as I go. But I want to put in just the main shapes, and I'm going to keep putting those in with a little bit of this burnt sienna, so thinning it down slightly just with a little bit of water, making myself a little puddle, and a touch of the raw as well. That's just going to help me draw in my major shapes. I want to know that the trees are coming up into the sky there, so just give them a little bit of a major idea of where they're coming there. That's going to be the ideas of the trees. I'm not really wanting to do anything other than put the idea of where the shapes are going to go. Shapes are going to come down through here, trees are going to continue along there, and then there'll be another layer of trees coming back through here, meeting up with that layer of trees. We can see them coming through there. They're going to be quite dark. You can see if you squint, you don't even have to squint because this is a value map, that they're quite dark coming back through here, so I'll be adding in a lot of darks to that. Then we have the shape of that paddock running down there, so I'm just putting in the curve of that. And then I want to put in the suggestion of the grasses are going to come out from here. The track, the path is going to have that little curve and come back that way and then that way. So just putting in the main lines of that, curving. I like the way it curves a little bit up that way, so I'm just going to give it a little bit of that curve to remind me I liked that. And then this bank comes round to meet that one, out through there, round, and then the bank curves over and down into this area. So putting those directional lines on, and then there are going to be the posts coming up and then down, and there'll be more shrubs coming around here, so let's just block those in. And there is the main outline sketched onto there. I haven't put in the lighthouse yet. The lighthouse I'm just going to put in with a bit of white, and it won't show up there, but it will show up. So I'm not putting the lighthouse in yet. I'm going to leave the lighthouse to the last thing. I know where it's going to go. I could put just down the side here. It's a shadowed side on this side, so I could just put down there a bit of a line to show me where I want it. And then we'll worry about getting everything else right later on. Okay, so the main lines are in, composition lines are in. We just want to let that dry and then move on to doing the sky. So while it's drying off a little, I'll mix up a few colours over here. I'm going to keep this colour here, which was the cobalt blue and a bit of the white. I'm going to mix, in the sky, I'm going to mix a little bit of this sienna, raw sienna, and thin it down with a bit of white. I'm going to lay in a little bit of that on the horizon. The one other colour I didn't put out, which I do like to use, I'm going to get now. I'm sorry I forgot that. I forgot to get it out because it's in my tub, not my tube. So this is the Naples yellow, and this is a very good colour. Just going to put it there to help with lightening things when you don't want to use white and don't want to get it too chalky. So I'll add a little bit of that into my sky there. Just clean my brush off in between, grab some and add it in there. What I want to do with this is just make the sky a little bit lighter there. And I'm pulling it along there. I don't mind that I'm going over the tree outline. They'll come back in over the top. You can still see it through there. This is just to lighten up the sky as a base for the sky. As I go up, I might give it a little bit of a darker colour. And then I'm going to glaze over the top of it with some blues and little bits of greyed off colours for the clouds that are in the distance. So that's just going in now as a underpainting glaze. while I'm doing this underpainting, I'm going to actually I think I'll put in that bit of sea first because that will be easier. I'm going to go back into this colour that I used just earlier and bring it back over there. It's already dried off. I don't mind that it goes a little bit into the sky there because I'm going to crisp that up later. So this is just one layer of the sea. I'm going to add in some ultramarine to that. A touch more of the cobalt. And I want to grey it off a little bit. I'm just going to add in a little touch of that to a corner of it. It's a bit of a grey day, so that's a little bit of the burnt sienna going in over there. And then I can just stroke it through, picking up different blues as I go, stroking it through with my brush. I'm using my brush for this part of the painting. It's smoother, that sea. But I will be using my palette knife when I go into some of the other areas, the grasses, the path and the trees there. So laying down those colours, you can see how they just work into each other. And smoothing them out. And I'll be giving that another coat too with some more colours. I'm just going to let that one dry. While that's drying, I'm going to move down to these dark areas here. What I'm going to use there is just this straight purple. I want them nice and dark, and I'll be going right over actually straight purple with a touch of burnt sienna in it, so it's a reddy purple colour. And I'm not mixing in with this any of the mediums because I just want this to be a straight underpainting, and I'm going through and it's giving it a browny purple. Oops, wrong colour. Dipped into the wrong colour. Here's the purple again. I'm just going to make this side a little bit more purple so I get this variation of purples and reddy purples right through the area where those trees are going. And they're going to come right down here. To meet that pathway that goes through there. Just dabbing it on, not getting too worried about what it actually, how realistic it looks at this moment. And it's very dark and deep down in here, shadow. So what I'm doing is really just popping in the values now. And I'm looking back here and saying, where are the dark areas? I'll just put in some dark strokes. I am using the brush in the direction that those, so this is grasses coming down, so this is more of just a straight through there. But when you get down here, it's more about the tree shapes and shrub shapes. So I'm just dabbing it on. Because even though it's an underpainting, I want it to reflect the characteristic of what I'm painting. It's lighter around this area, so and just let them be a little bit lighter. I'd like them to overlap there though. I don't really want that running down into the sea and out of the edge of the painting, so I'm adapting as I go. A little bit more of the purple to put some deeper bits in here. And then just keep dabbing around here. The edge of the path is along here underneath the fence, so just laying in some purples there. But as you can see, not nearly as dark as back in here. Nice dabby little marks. So in the underpainting I have got the purple and then the redder colour, so I've got a little bit of variation in the underpainting as well. Paint goes on quite differently onto a prepared board than it does onto a canvas. It's more slippery and slick, the surface, so it slips on in a more slippery way, and that's quite good. I like painting rivers in and water in it, because it gives you that slick kind of surface. And there's a little dark area up here, which is where that is going around, so I'm just slotting that in. A few little dark bits across there. And then these trees up here, which I'm not going to put in yet because I want to finish off the sky and the water before I start going over that tree area. But I do know that it's going to have a quite a dark little area going down to the sea there. And when I put that in, I can see that I haven't really put enough of the sea in behind it. So in I go again. Even though the trees will be over this, I do want to a little bit more of that, just a touch of it in there to make it a bit deeper and darker. So now that's going to go in. What I'm trying to do here is, you can see in this little sketch, it was getting quite overcast, and I'm going to want to have that sort of feel to it. So I'm making the water darker than I might normally make it, to give that feeling of an impending storm. But then I want to have this area more sunlit, as in this one. So I'm mixing up the references that I made while I was out there on site to give me the painting I want now. You can see that the brush just slides over that panel. And then I'll put a couple of just straight ultramarine through it, and as I do that, you can see some of the white from underneath shows through. So it depends how you use the brush. If I use the very tip of it and pull it through, I get some marks there that look kind of like waves. If I use the flatter part of the brush and drag it through, I can eliminate a lot of those marks. So it depends what you're going for, how you use the brush. Here I'm going to let a few of those marks show to sort of suggest that the sea's getting a little bit worked up out there. Yeah, I put my finger on that, I can tell that it's really dry. So it does dry off very quickly, the acrylics. So now I can go back in to the sky, and what I want to do for the sky is take some of that sea colour, add some white into it. And starting down low, I'm just going to pop some of that on, dragging the brush across. It was quite hazy out there, like a sea fret was coming in, so I'm not worried that I'm dragging it over the ocean, over the horizon. That is a way to tie those two elements together, the land and the sky. You just need a nice steady hand for it. And a light touch if you don't want to pick up too much underneath. So now, just going to fill that whole area. And now I'm doing it in much more freer strokes. You can see now I'm away from the horizon because I want to give the illusion of some clouds there. And I'm letting the white mix in with this other blue that has a little bit of the burnt umber in it too. So now I'm getting some movement from the clouds as I just pull my brush through there. I don't want to stop it in the middle. You can see if I pull it and just stop it abruptly, I get little marks. What you need to do is pull it and lift. And then as you lift it gently off, the brush mark comes out. Unless, of course, you want a brush mark in there. I want to even darken that sky up further. So what I'm going to do is take a tiny touch of purple now. I'm dabbing it on there so I don't want too much. And just add that in so they get a bit more darker, stormy kind of colours coming in there. add some little bits out closer to the horizon there. Oh dear, I've got a little bit of hair in that one, so I just dabbed it off with my finger before it dried into the... Oh, I thought I had. This is where your palette knife can be quite handy. I live with a long-haired cat in our household, and she sometimes gets in here even though I try to keep her out. She's got a portrait of her over in the corner that she comes and looks at. And I just wonder, what's she thinking? Who is this cat? Why are they so big? Why are they in this room that I'm not allowed in? If I want to insinuate that there's some rain coming, I can take some of this grey mixture and just pull it down in these kind of strokes. Softening them off a bit. And letting them sort of mix in over the sea. Oops, didn't mean to pull the sea up into it. So I just pull them down, and I'm just cleaning off my brush in between. Then I'm going to just go back through there. So I'm insinuating a bit of rain there. I don't have to leave that if I don't like it. In fact, I don't like it. So that is the beauty. I can just go back in and say no, no to the rain. But I do like the clouds sort of scudding across there. So I'm adding a bit more of those in. And while that's drying, I'm going to start down here and do a little bit of work on the pathway there. Now the pathway, I am going to mix in some of the gloss medium here. So here's the gloss medium, and the pathway is going to be a more greyed off colour. Some of it's in shadow from over here because the sun's shining that way, so there'll be grasses with a touch of light on here, but here is going to be fairly dark. So I'm going to start off with this burnt sienna sort of colour mixed in with a bit of the gel, and then I'm going to add some of the purple to that, and then I'm going to go down and put a little bit of the Naples yellow in it as well. And I'm not going to mix it up too much. That's as far as I'm going. So I've got a bit of a neutral colour there, and I can just pick it up with the sharp edge of there and use that to scrape it across. And just leave the marks that I get. I've got a rounder edge here that I can pick it up on and just move it in that way and get a sweeping curve look to the path there. I don't want that edge so straight, so that's why I'm using the curved bit there. And then I've got that little bit there that curves under, so here we go. There's the general shape of the path. And now what I'm going to do is take some of the yellow and a little bit of the raw. So I'm going to mix those together and add some of that on top, so that what I get is a nice mix of colours. Over here it can be even lighter, so I'm taking some of the straight Naples yellow and adding a bit of that in at the edge. It's quite dark there, and what I'm going to do to darken it off a bit is put some purple glaze on, but not until that's dried. So I'll be going back later in and putting the grasses in here with sort of little dabby things, but at the moment path is in basically, and then I have to think about these other sweeps of the grass there, which I want to put in first before I go back and put more of the trees over it. So I'm going to put those in now. I'm going to have a lot of this Naples yellow and then a little of the raw sienna, and that's going to be the lighter grasses across this way. They come through like that. They sweep over the paddock this way. And then I can just pick up, I don't have to mix it all on the palette. So here I'm just taking some of the darker and mixing it in, so then I'll take the lighter, put the lighter along the edge there, pulling that down. And you can see as I pull, they all mix together. And you get a nice bit of texture, and they're mixing on the board rather than me mixing them here on the palette. Just need to move things slightly to get my hand in there. And I'm using the round part of the palette knife now because it gives you a nice curve as you pull it. You can see how nicely curved it goes. And adding in some of the darker colour as we come down. I have that paddock in very, very quickly. You can see how quickly the palette knife works there. Now, I want this one to be a little bit greener, so what I'm going to do is take a little bit of this cerulean blue and start adding it into that mix and see how I like it. I want to make it slightly greener, so I'm taking, and I don't want it to be a vividy kind of green that is. I want it to be more of an earthy green. I'm not sure that I like that colour, but I'm going to start with it and see. Yeah, it's too dark. I'm going to take a little bit of this green gold, and you can see how bright it is. It's quite like that colour, which I didn't really want. So I'm going to take that and put the teeniest touch of cobalt blue into it, which has made it darker. And then I'm going to take some of that and try that and let it mix in with that. For that far paddock. I'm also going to take some of the green gold and mix a tiny bit of the raw umber with it. So it takes the edge off it a bit, but allows it to introduce a new element into there. So I've got a bluey green, a yellowy green, and a more straightforward green. I'm just adding all those colours in, mixing them again like I did the earlier ones, using the palette knife just to scrape through. I put too much pressure on, I pick up what's underneath though. If I keep working it too much, I lose the effect I want. I can add in a little bit more of just the raw umber straight into it. Let it mix on the palette there. By doing this, I'm getting some nice natural earthy colours in there, which is what I want for this area. And now I'm just taking a few of those greens and pulling them into some of this area too as it comes down into the shadow. I don't want to lose the crisp edge there, and I'll get that back, but in here I've missed a little bit, so I'm just going to pick it up. Put that in. Whoops. So lots of different variations of colour in there. What I want to do back here now is get that crisp edge again, so I'm just taking some of that Naples yellow, thinking about how I want the shape to go. Cleaning off on the rag in between, because otherwise you're just contaminating everything. A little bit more of that. Now at this stage I could add in a little bit more of that gel, just to make it slightly more body for that little stretch there. I like the way it just pulls over those other colours underneath it, helping to mix it optically there. There is a kind of edge here, which is going to be a bit of shadowed edge, and I'm going to get that in a minute. This, I'm just going to use this to kind of edge up that bit now, using the very sharp tip just to pull up some grasses. And this is all going to get refined. Come in.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, what?
So Tarquinia
Yes.
is forecast next Friday for the maximum of 28, minimum of 18.
Okay,
That's good.
that is good.
And Radicophony is over the next week between 19 and 25.
Well, it's a cooler.
Mainly
Yes.
low 20s.
Okay, that sounds good.
Doesn't it, Ed?
Yes. Just got to get on with this now, and I'll be finished soon. I did want to know that, but I could have known it later. Anyway, you can see now it's developing nicely. It's got some texture. Even though it's quite small, it's got some texture from the palette knife I'm using. It's got some brush marks up here from where I'm doing the sky. And I have to think about this bush over here. And what I'm going to do over here is put in some quite dark deeps. So I'm going to start off with some of this sienna, burnt, a bit of the purple, mixed into it, and a bit of the gel to give it a little bit of body. So a little bit more of that, a little bit more of that. Give that a bit of a mix up, and then I'm going to take a bit more of the purple, and I can make a decision there whether I want to put it in with the palette knife or not. What I am going to do is just start with the brush to get in the under colours there, and use that brush in the sort of directions that the grasses are growing. It's going to end up being quite, and while I'm at it, I'm pulling some of this darks into those shadowed areas there, just with my brush. So you can vary, you don't have to stick to just the palette knife or just the brush. And I might even put a little bit of that coming a few places up here into the palette knifed area. Okay, so this is just pulling up into there, and it's going to have some lighter tops as we get around here. So this area of the grasses of this paddock is actually quite darker than I made it. It's kind of shadowed, so just making that area a little bit more shadowed so that I can play these grasses in the foreground off them. Right, so that's got that shape kind of blocked in there, and I can start on some of these other shrubs and bushes. Just giving this little, is it dry test? And you can see it is. So what I want to do now is work a little bit more back into there, and I'm debating whether to make the whole thing palette knife here. I really like the effect here, and maybe I'll actually use a bit of palette knife work in the sky. So that will require more paint. You need more paint when you're doing palette knife work. So I'm going to just mix up a little bit more of the sky colours. Touch of purple there. Mix those up. And add in a little bit of the gloss gel. And just try. Sometimes you need to turn this upside down to make it work properly with the way your hand works. So here I just want to pull some of those clouds through with my palette knife. And you can see I'm getting a little bit more texture. I'm just taking a bit of pure white now, mixing it in over here. I do need to turn it around again and pulling that through as well, just to layer in some different colours in those clouds. Maybe a little bit of, I keep manipulating them quite well to get sort of edges and overlapping bits there. The whole sky is quite cloudy, so I'm just working it all in there. There's a hint that there might be some light out there. If I wanted to get that effect of the rain, I can just take the palette knife and sort of pull some of the rain out from the clouds like so, and you get that effect of it being rainy out and squally out there. If I want to lighten off some areas, I'm just picking up some pure white. It doesn't stay pure white for long once you start dragging it through the clouds that exist there. And over here I'd like that to be darker, so I'm just taking in some of the dark mix I had, pulling that through. And you get a very effective impression of a very cloudy sky there quite quickly. And fill the clouds right over to this edge. But I'm going to let this be a little bit lighter down here with some of that, some of the light colour coming through. So just letting some of the light show through, suggesting that there's going to be relief from the storm. So you can see now I've got a little bit of light showing through underneath the storm. And that suggests that up above this area there might be some light coming down too, and makes that a little bit more realistic. In here there's going to be some more shadow. You can see the little dark line there, and I'm going to be putting that in soon. Do I want to do anything more to the sea? Do I want that to have a little bit more texture? Well, I could do that by using the palette knife, or I could just take a little bit of texture gel, mix myself up a little bit more of the sea, take a little bit of the white and mix in there as well. And pick up both of the colours at the same time on my brush and just stroke them across. This will give the sea a bit more body. Because that was a very thin wash underneath it. And you always have that possibility that you're going to lift off with these Atelier Interactives, that you're going to re-wet the surface underneath and lift some of that colour off. So now I've got quite a nice look on the sea there. I want it to lighten off here because there's that, I think I've actually put that in the wrong spot, because I want to put in the, you can see where I want to put in the lighthouse. I don't want it, no, I'm going to leave it that way. I'll let the lighthouse blend in a bit with the background there, but then it will be quite white and contrasty against the trees and the sky there. Okay. That's all coming along really well. So now I can start dabbing in. I don't have to wait for that to dry to start dabbing in the trees. They'll need to go in behind the lighthouse before that can go in. So I'll start some work on the trees now. For the trees, I can use this rounder palette knife, and I'm going to take some of the green gold. I'm going to take some of the texture gel. The texture gel dries really clear, but gives a gloss look to it, which helps the colours to really pop a bit more. And it will all be coated with a varnish afterwards, so that will add a bit more gloss to it too. So that's just going in to help with the gloss level and the structure, to give a little bit more structure to the trees. I'm going to mix up a few different piles here. I'm going to be using some of the colours that I've already got so that it gives a harmonious feel to it. Australian gums often have this reddy feel to them as well, and you can see on this one there's a glow to them as they come around here into that area that's a bit more well lit. So even though it's a storm coming in, you can't see it on this photograph, but there's more storm clouds up there. So there's a storm coming in, but it's still got some sunny, well lit areas there. I'm just checking my composition at this stage to make sure that I'm happy, and I actually think I want the sea to come a little bit further down here. So I'm going to put in a bit more of the sea coming down that way. Might need to mix up slightly more. One good tip, which I'm going to do right now, is to divide my white. So in that one are whites for mixing with light colours, and this one is the whites for mixing with darker colours, and then I don't end up with muddy lights. So in with that, and then a touch of the ultramarine. I'm going to pop that in down here, a little bit darker, I'd like that. So a little bit more of the ultramarine. I might even pull some back there in that to go with that very light area of the sky, and then add more as I come away from the light area of the sky. Oops. Oh, that's a rookie mistake, isn't it? I picked up some of that green, so I'm just wiping that out. I don't want the green to get in. Smoothing off my horizon, then making it slightly darker there. I'm not too worried about a bit of green having got in that area, because it's going to be covered up with the trees. And I'm just keeping modifying those blues till I'm happy with them. A bit more of deeper blue out that side, but not as dark as over here, because it is darker from the clouds over there. I'm trying to pull that into the land rather than the land out, so I don't end up with too much of that green going into the sea. And I think what I'm going to end up doing is messing that up if I keep playing around with it. But does that stop me, folks? No. Right, I'm going to leave that, and I'll fix up the sea later on when I want to. Right now we're getting back into what I interrupted myself with, the trees around there. So I'm mixing up some different colours. I'm putting a bit of the structure paste in, that heavy body paste in each of the colours. So that's going to be a sienna-y kind of colour. That is going to be the green gold. which I am going to modify off a bit with some of the yellow, the raw sienna. And you could substitute the raw sienna for, and some with the burnt sienna, with a yellow ochre. I often use yellow ochres too, but today I put out the raw sienna. Okay, so I've got two different greens there, a very deep reddy colour there, which I want to make into a deeper green, and I'm taking some of this ultramarine blue and mixing in with that to get a nice dark, deep, rich colour. And that's going to help in the shadowed areas of the trees. And then I'm going to take some of the ultramarine and add just the yellow to it for another green. This is a duller sort of green. Maybe a touch more of the blue. And that one's going to get a little bit of the paste as well, the body paste. So there I have, they don't look your bright greens, which I didn't want. They're sort of yellow greens and blue greens, and that's what I'm after. So I'm going to start with the really dark bits, and they're coming in here at the shadowed edge down here. So there'll be lots of shadows behind the trees, and that's what I'm popping in now. All through there, at the back of this brightly lit paddock are shadows. And they're just going in with the edge of the palette knife. So you can see that although this is a small painting, it still takes a reasonable amount of time, and it's not always quicker doing small paintings. You have to be more fiddly with the details, and so sometimes it can take you longer than you think. So I'm just using the side of the palette knife and then the rounded tip to indicate where those tree shadows are going. It's a little bit up here. It's going to be in front of the lighthouse, and I'll be putting that in later. And then I've got some little edgy bits along here. I don't want to make too thick a shadow edge along there, but I can't be too tentative either. So along here it's quite somehow I had a bit of white on that, but that's okay because I'm just going to pop in some dabby, just dabbing that round bit along there. For the shadow part of the trees. And I don't care that as I'm dabbing it I'm picking up some of the green off the paddocks and mixing it a bit into the trees. That's all fine. I'm trying to leave some little gaps between these dabs for the sky colour. And in a minute I'll have a go with the brush so you can see the difference. A little bit more control of the brush.